What is going on, guys? MMA Island team. We got the fight picks, and we got Khama Worthy taking on Ottman Azaitar. Man, before I talk about this fight, I will pass it on to Zach, but this one hits close to home. Khama Worthy being one of my favorite fighters, one of my favorite guys to ever interview. Make sure you guys are go checking out the interviews, but I will pass it on to Zach.
Khama Worthy has been good to me in picks. Lone Wolf selection, choosing him against Luis Pena, and I don't like Luis Pena, so that was good to watch. Now, Ottman Azaitar is an absolute monster. Just a straight killer, undefeated kickboxing phenom coming out of Brave, training in Morocco with his brother Abu Azaitar, also a very strong fighter in his own right. Also trains with Yusuf Zalal. Man, in his first fight in the UFC, Timu Pakalin, a guy that not a lot of people were very confident in, and saying that he wasn't really UFC caliber. Azaitar that's one of the scariest knockouts you will ever see, because when Azaitar knocks him out, Pakalin's legs are just shaking on the ground. It's just like straight terrifying. But the thing, I'm not really the biggest fan of these one-dimensional guys. Ottman Azaitar is a kickboxing phenom through and through. He's just an absolutely great kickboxer, but I like the well-roundedness that Khama Worthy has. We know that he can submit people, he can take people down, and that's one thing that I kind of have to look at, because I think Azaitar will win the striking exchanges. I think his technicality is just off the charts good. Some of the best we've seen. And Worthy, he is a brawler. He can absolutely get in there and strike with him. But I think that his path to victory is through the ground, and I think he knows that. Khama Worthy does possess the wrestling necessary to keep Ottman Azaitar down. And if he keeps him down, Azaitar can't really do all that much. And Worthy's top pressure is very, very strong, especially with someone not really used to that and not really used to that adversity. I'm picking Khama Worthy here. But again, do not be surprised if Ottman Azaitar wins. It's just he's a little bit too untested for me here. His one UFC fight is against a guy who's not really UFC caliber, and his other fights aren't against the world's best regional competition. And I do value his skills. I love watching Ottman Azaitar fight. Watching his striking is just gorgeous. It absolutely is. But I just think that Worthy has seen it before a little bit, and I think that, again, he can wrestle this fight to a decision, because I don't believe Azaitar's takedown defense will hold up all too well. But we will see. We will see. A lot of this is that Azaitar is really unproven and untested. And again, do not be surprised if Azaitar comes out and wins. And this fight is very close in the odds for very good reason, because it is an incredibly close fight. But at the end of the day, I'm choosing Khama Worthy by decision or submission.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this one hits close to home because Khama Worthy is one of my favorite fighters, one of my favorite people to talk to. Him and Nico Price both up there for one of my favorite dudes in the UFC. And man, I went with Luis Pena in the last fight, and Khama Worthy was able to get the win, and I wasn't upset because I love Khama Worthy, and seeing him get that win, I kind of jumped out of my seat and was like, yes, and then I remembered I had Luis Pena winning. So this is a close fight. A lot of things to look into. And, man, typically we want to talk about the stats. Can you even really talk about the stats when they have 3 combined UFC fights here? Not really. So I'm going to try not to talk about them. But looking at their fights. So I think the first thing people notice when you look at Khama Worthy is that obviously he's had the crazy amount of finishes. He's had the guillotine win over Pena recently, obviously, and then coming in on very, very short notice against Devontae Smith, getting that knockout victory. He typically wins by knockout, but when you look at his losses, 6 losses, 5 of them by TKO. Obviously, his last one was in 2017 against fellow fighter on the card, Kyle Nelson. And then obviously another fellow fighter on the card, Billy Quarantillo, which I failed to mention. And then Paul Felder as well. And so he's got KO losses against some pretty good competition. And then I have to agree with you, man. Looking at Ottman Azaitar, he's he hasn't fought the greatest amount of competition. My favorite thing to say is that guys are undefeated for a reason. And I got to say that's true. We haven't really seen any negatives out of Ottman Azaitar. I think I'm leaning with Ottman Azaitar in this one, just for a few reasons. And I'm not looking too much into Khama Worthy's TKO losses. Uh, those were a long time ago. You can't
Mostly
really
at
say
featherweight and weight class down.
exactly. So he's had 7 fights since as well, and has been able to win all of them. It's kind of interesting to see that this fight's the co-main event. Obviously, we know the whole main event deal, but it's interesting to see these guys be so short into their UFC career. And this is why what Zach was mentioning to me, and I totally agree with him, this is a hardcore card because a lot of these fights are guys that the typical fan wouldn't know, and the guys who go deep into it, going deep MMA, typically we know all of these guys. So I think I've watched pretty well all of these people fight live. And it's definitely the case with Khama Worthy. And definitely Ottman Azaitar. You mentioned the knockout of Timo Pacquiao, and probably my least favorite knockout to watch because of, as you mentioned, how scary it was. At that point, when you see someone get their lights shut out like that, you can appreciate the KO, but it's scary. Like, it's definitely scary. One thing that my mother and family members typically mention when I show them fights, it's like, I don't find any sort of pleasure in finding people get beat up. It's like, this is a sport, but when stuff happens like that and you see lights get shut out like that, it gets scary. This is I think one of my another one that I'm going to be betting on, which I assume also isn't going to be very well paying if I bet on it, is if that this fight will not go the distance. This fight will not go the distance. I see this fight getting finished definitely. Out of what's the math on this? This is going to be a bunch of math here, but out of all of their fights combined, we got 5 decisions. So, man, you can't really look at this like as a fight that they're going to be going to decision because, so what's the math? 34, 16, 18, 12. So looking at this, 34 fights, 5 have went the distance. You have to say that this one gets finished. And if you're looking at who it's going to get finished by, honestly, man, I'm going to have to go with Azaitar in this one. I hope Worthy gets the win just because, as I mentioned, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC at the moment.
Shades of the Pena prediction.
Definitely, but I think I just got to leave with Azaitar. We haven't seen him face the tough competition. We also haven't seen him lose to the tough competition. This is definitely tough competition. But I'm looking for him to go out there and show his skills up against the tough competition and definitely in Khama Worthy. So we disagree on this one. Want to know what you guys are saying. So make sure you guys comment and let us know who you guys got for the co-main event of the evening. In Khama Worthy and Ottman Azaitar. So like I said, man, make sure you guys are letting us know what you think, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and check out the other Fight Pick videos.